Welcome back to the deep dive. I'm really excited about today's topic.
Oh, yeah. What's got you so fired up?
Well, you sent over this market report on Pakistan's solar energy scene, and wow,
Yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff. A lot of growth happening over there.
it is. And I think it's a story a lot of people might not be aware of, but it's really worth understanding.
Absolutely. Especially for anyone interested in, you know, emerging energy markets and how countries are tackling, well, those energy challenges, frankly.
Exactly. So, our mission today, folks, is to unpack this report, really dig into it, and see if we can pull out some key insights, the things that really make this a story worth paying attention to.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so first things first. To really appreciate what's going on with solar in Pakistan, we need to understand the context.
Right. Totally. We got to set the stage.
So historically, Pakistan has struggled with some pretty serious energy issues.
Oh, for sure. Persistent power shortages.
Yeah.
Real lack of energy security.
And this has had a huge impact on their economy, social stability, just daily life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine not knowing if you're going to have electricity when you get home from work. It's a drag.
It's more than a drag. It's a major barrier to development.
Right, exactly. And for a long time, Pakistan relied heavily on, well, the usual suspects, fossil fuels.
Yeah, but that came with its own set of problems,
For
right?
sure, they have limited reserves of their own.
And the price of fossil fuels. Global market, all over the place, always unpredictable.
Huge volatility. Really difficult to plan for.
So all of this created a real, a pressing need for alternatives. And increasingly, solar power is emerging as that answer.
Yeah, and this report does a great job of showing how this transition is happening.
It does. And it points to a really pivotal moment. China's Belt and Road Initiative in 2015. Now, folks, the BRI, it's massive, lots of different projects. But what's really fascinating in the context of Pakistan's solar journey is...
How they targeted a key bottleneck, Pakistan's power transmission infrastructure.
Okay, explain that, because that might not be immediately obvious to everyone.
Right. So think about it this way. You can generate tons of solar power, right? Especially in, say, remote, sunny regions.
Makes sense. Lots of open lands, tons of sun.
But if you can't efficiently move that electricity to the cities, to the industries, it's basically useless.
You got to get it where it's needed.
Exactly. And that's where the BRI came in. They invested heavily in upgrading Pakistan's transmission lines, built those essential highways for solar energy to travel.
So the BRI, it's not just handing out solar panels, it's laying the groundwork for a whole system.
Right. They addressed a fundamental infrastructure challenge, and that was absolutely key to unlocking the potential of large-scale solar projects, the kind that can really make a dent in a country's energy mix.
That's a great point. It's not just about generating the power, it's about delivering it effectively.
You got it.
So with that foundation in place, what specific steps has the Pakistani government taken to actually create a favorable environment for solar to thrive?
Well, first off, they've been really proactive on the policy front. The report makes that clear.
Give us some examples. What kinds of policies are we talking about?
There's a definite push to reduce their reliance on fossil fuels. It's explicit in their policy statements. And one of their key tactics has been attracting foreign investment.
Right, making Pakistan an attractive place for solar companies to do business.
Exactly. And they're using some, proven methods to do this, like offering tax exemptions and targeted investment incentives specifically designed to attract solar energy companies and projects.
Okay, break that down a little. What kinds of tax exemptions, what are those incentives looking like?
Well, the report probably goes into detail, but you're likely looking at exemptions on things like import duties for solar components, panels, inverters, the stuff you need to build a solar power system.
And on the incentive side?
Yeah. Think potentially corporate income tax relief for companies operating in the solar sector, maybe some accelerated depreciation benefits for investments in solar projects, things like that. The goal is to reduce the financial burden, make those projects more profitable, make Pakistan more attractive to investors compared to other countries that might be vying for those same dollars.
So they're really sweetening the deal for solar companies to come in and set up shop.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just about attracting foreign companies. They're also thinking about the long game. Remember that proposal from the Federal Minister for Law and Justice back in April of 24?
Yeah, the one about establishing domestic solar module manufacturing plants?
That's the one. It's a bold ambition. They're
Yeah.
talking about offering 10-year incentives to encourage local production.
10 years is a pretty big commitment. What's the thinking there?
It's about multiple wins. They want to create jobs, obviously, much-needed jobs within Pakistan. It's about boosting the economy, but it's also about technology transfer, building up their own expertise in this critical sector.
So kind of a move towards greater energy independence in the long run.
Exactly. But it's important to understand the report makes this distinction that while this long-term vision is in the works, the immediate strategy is about making solar projects viable right now.
So how are they doing that?
By extending tax exemptions on imported solar cells and modules. This is a pragmatic move. It directly lowers the upfront cost for solar projects today, makes those projects more attractive to businesses, and helps accelerate adoption in the short term. It's like saying, hey, we want to build our own manufacturing capacity eventually, but we need to get this market moving now.
Right, so they're not waiting around. They're taking action to drive growth today while building towards that longer-term vision.
Exactly. It's a smart, multi-pronged approach.
Okay, so we see the government really trying to shape a favorable environment from the top down. But what's happening on the ground level with demand? Who's actually embracing solar in Pakistan?
Well, we're seeing this really interesting two-pronged demand story unfold.
Okay, tell us about it.
On the one hand, the report highlights this significant surge in demand for residential solar energy systems.
So individual homeowners, people putting panels on their roofs?
Exactly. And it's not hard to see why. Electricity prices are going up, 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 putting a real squeeze on household budgets. And at the same time, net metering systems are becoming more available and more effective.
Okay, for our listeners who might not be familiar with net metering.
Sure. Basically, it allows homeowners with solar panels to sell any excess electricity they generate back to the power grid. You get credits on their bills. So it turns your solar system into like a little mini power plant that can actually earn you money.
So it's not just about reducing your own electric bill. You can actually become a mini energy producer.
Right. It's like turning your house into a tiny power station. And that makes investing in solar so much more financially attractive.
And the report backs this up, right, with that customs data.
Absolutely. The data shows this huge year-on-year increase in the value of imported solar modules with this really sharp jump in the last 2 years. That's real money being spent on solar, a clear sign of growing consumer demand.
So it's not just hype or wishful thinking. This is a trend backed by hard numbers. People are voting with their wallets, choosing solar.
Exactly. And it's not just happening randomly. There's a real organized effort behind it, particularly at the provincial level.
Right. And this is where the report gets really interesting. It dives into these specific actions being taken at the provincial level, and they're laser focused.
They really are. Each province has its own strategy, tailored to its unique conditions and priorities.
Okay, let's break them down one by one. Let's start with Sindh province. What are they doing?
Sindh's gone big. In July 2024, they announced this plan to promote 200,000 residential solar systems.
200,000 homes going solar. That's a serious goal.
Yeah, and they're putting their money where their mouth is. They're offering an 80% subsidy for those installations.
80%? That's huge. What's the thinking there?
Well, Sindh has been hit hard by high electricity prices, frequent power shortages, you know it. So they're making a real effort to get solar into the hands of those who need it most, specifically low-income households. It's about energy access, affordability, and building resilience against those power outages.
It's about making solar a practical solution for everyday people, not just a luxury for the wealthy.
Exactly. And it's not just individual homes they're focusing on. They're also planning 305 milliW of utility-scale solar projects. They're attacking their energy challenges from multiple angles.
A really comprehensive approach. Okay, let's move on to Balochistan. They seem to be taking a more sector-specific approach, right?
You got it. Balochistan's focusing on agriculture. They're rolling out this solar conversion plan specifically aimed at agricultural wells.
What does that mean in practice?
Well, a lot of those wells, they rely on diesel generators for power, which is expensive and polluting. So they're helping farmers switch those wells over to solar power.
Makes a lot of sense. Reduce costs for farmers, lower their environmental impact. It's a win-win.
Exactly. It's a targeted intervention, focusing on a crucial sector of Balochistan's economy, one that's vital for their food security.
Okay, last but not least, Punjab. What's their strategy?
Punjab's gone really direct, almost radical. Effective August of 24, they implemented a policy that gives free solar modules to households consuming under 200 units of electricity per month.
Wait, free solar panels? That's amazing.
Yeah, and it gets even better. For households using between 200 and 500 units, they cover 90% of the cost.
So basically nearly free solar for a huge chunk of the population.
Exactly. They're projecting this could reduce electricity costs for low-income households by up to 40%. And that's massive. Not only does it make solar super affordable, it also creates a big incentive for people to reduce their electricity consumption.
So it's about both access and efficiency. I love it.
Me too.
Meh.
It's a bold policy with the potential to really transform energy use at the household level.
Okay, so we've talked about the government's efforts, both national and provincial, and the growing demand for solar. But the report also points out some, inherent reasons why solar, in particular, makes so much sense for Pakistan.
Yeah, some real advantages that go beyond policy.
What are some of the key factors there?
Well, let's start with the obvious. Pakistan gets a ton of sunshine.
Like a lot. A lot.
Yeah. The report says they average 7 to 8 hours of sunlight per day. That's more than enough to power their energy needs in a cost-effective way. It's like having this abundant free energy source just waiting to be tapped.
It's a huge natural advantage,
Right.
and one that's, only going to become more valuable as solar technology keeps getting better.
Exactly. And beyond just the amount of sun, there's the stability factor.
Okay, explain that.
Well, unlike fossil fuels, which are notorious for price swings, solar energy provides much more stable electricity rates over the long term.
So it's like a hedge against inflation, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a huge deal for businesses, for the economy as a whole. When energy costs are unpredictable, it makes planning and investment so much more difficult. Solar takes away that uncertainty.
Makes sense. Stable energy costs are good for everyone.
Totally. And then there's the fact that solar is, well, it's inherently decentralized.
Meaning?
It can be implemented at the individual home or business level. You don't need to build these massive power plants and transmission lines to bring it to people.
Right, you put the panels on your roof and boom, you're generating your own power.
Exactly. And that's a big deal in a country like Pakistan, which, still faces some infrastructure challenges. Distributed generation, it makes them less reliant on that central grid, more resilient.
And it creates jobs, right? We can't forget about that.
Oh, absolutely. As the solar sector grows, you need people to design, install, maintain, and repair those systems. It's a whole new industry with the potential to create a lot of good-paying jobs.
And, potentially even manufacturing jobs down the line if they're successful in developing their domestic production capacity.
Right, exactly. It's an economic engine with a lot of potential.
Okay, so it sounds like a pretty rosy picture, but the report's not all sunshine and roses, right? There are challenges, hurdles to overcome.
Of course, there always are.
So what are some of the key challenges they highlight?
Well, infrastructure is still an issue. The grid in some regions might not be able to handle the influx of power from all these new solar installations, especially as they scale up.
So as solar penetration increases, grid upgrades need to keep pace.
Right, and that's not always easy or cheap. Plus, there's a shortage of skilled labor, people who can actually install and maintain these systems.
Right, you need trained technicians, electricians, the whole workforce.
Exactly. And then there's the financial reality.
Mm.
Pakistan is going to need continued foreign investment to meet these ambitious goals.
Right, that reliance on outside funding does create some vulnerability.
It does. But even with those challenges, the overall outlook is positive. The report projects that Pakistan's solar energy demand could hit 9 to 10.5 gigawatts by 2030.
That's what, triple where they are today?
Pretty much. And if they can pull that off, they're going to be a major player in the global renewable energy scene.
Okay, so let's bring it all home for our listeners. What are the key takeaways here?
I think the big picture is clear. Pakistan's solar energy market is booming.
And that boom is driven by a combination of factors, right? We've got supportive government policies both at the national and provincial levels. We've got rising demand, especially from homeowners. And we've got those inherent advantages that make solar a really good fit for Pakistan.
And let's not forget those targeted provincial policies.
Oh.
That's a real takeaway for me,
Yeah.
especially in Sindh and Punjab. They're not just talking about solar. They're actively making it happen, particularly for those who stand to benefit most.
That's a really great point. Those provincial efforts are a big part of this story. They're driving change on the ground.
Right. It's not just a top-down thing. It's a bottom-up movement as well.
So for you listening, here's a final thought to ponder. Pakistan's relying on foreign investment to achieve these goals, and they're still developing their domestic manufacturing capacity. So how might things like global supply chain disruptions or, geopolitical shifts affect their long-term plans? It's something to keep an eye on as this market continues to evolve.
Definitely something to watch.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. It's a fascinating story with a lot more chapters to come.
I agree. We'll have to revisit this in a year or two and see how things are progressing.
Sounds good to me. Until next time.
See ya.